All right, contemporary worship music. First on your list, 4, 3, and 2. Contemporary worship music, 4 words, 3 notes, 2 hours. That one cracks me up. I love that one. Contemporary worship music, 7-Eleven. 7 words, sung 11 times over. And I think those jokes are hilarious, especially the 4-3-2. 4 words, 3 notes, 2 hours. And I won't poke fun at contemporary worship music for the whole time today because my focus is to present a biblical defense for contemporary worship music. But I couldn't resist a couple of jabs, and I have more. Because it's hilarious. I love jokes. The purpose of this current series, this spring series, is to provide a kind of overview of topics and resources. In the fall, we went through one book. This time, we're going to bounce around between a whole bunch of chapters and various books to give you different perspectives and ideas from different people, different topics. And those topics are listed on the back of your of that notes page that starts with lecture 1 on the back, kind of maps out, and that may be subject to change, but you can see some of the things that we'll be covering. Today is the introduction, biblical defense for contemporary worship music. Next week, reaching out without dumbing down. No class the following week. The next week, music and ministry. You can read the rest on your own time. So those are sort of the topics that we're going to shoot for. We're going to cover a lot of ground. I'm a firm believer. No, I'm a believer. I had to look up what a believer was and how to spell it. But I am a firm believer that what you don't know won't kill you. What you don't know won't kill you. So you don't actually have to know the answers to all of the questions, but it helps a lot to know where to look and whom to ask, or who to ask, or the person that knows the difference between whom and who. My wife's family has a saying that if someone gets asked a question and you don't know the answer to it, they're not allowed to just say, I don't know, but they have to follow it up with, but I can find out. And so knowing that there are places that you can find the answers is helpful, which is why for each of the packets I'm going to print up a chapter from each of the books. I'll print up the cover of the book, so you've got that, and then the table of contents for each of the books, and then the actual chapter excerpts to pull from, so that you can look through that and see what the context is for the different chapters. You'll be able to see how this fits in, and you might look at the table of contents and say, I need this book to learn more about it. So it's not going to be an exhaustive study that we're doing on any particular aspect, because an exhaustive study would be exhausting. And it's a lot of these chapters are out of context. Some of these books do a really great job of building from the beginning of the book to the end, and they lay a lot of groundwork until you finally get to some of the later chapters and it becomes a therefore this and this and this and the application of it all, which is great. So some of this is out of context, and you have to read the whole book to get the context for those. The plan is that we'll cover a chapter or 2 of each of them and work our way through various topics. Any questions about the agenda? All right, you can always email them to me or text me. I hate this. Today's topic, a biblical defense for contemporary worship music, or CWM. And if you use any of the information that I give you today to bash anyone, then there'll be some bashing going on. So don't use this as ammunition against each other. A good debate tool for the speech and debate. Have you guys seen the speech and debate? It's like a sport that kids do these days. And they've actually done it for a while, but to one of the styles of debate, you'll be given a topic, whatever the topic is. Should we invade the Middle East? And then you have to prepare two set cases for that and then against it. And you thoroughly research both sides of the argument. And then when it comes to the actual moment of debate, they flip a coin or however they decide, and the judge says, all right, this team's going to be, going for it, and this team's going to be going against it. and you put the one brief away, you pull out your other brief, and you argue passionately for whatever that side is. It's a really helpful tool. So this may be hopefully helpful for some of you that are set in the traditional camp to hear the other side of things, or if you're in the contemporary camp, to have some ammunition that way. This is the book that I'll be basing today's talk off of, Contemporary Worship Music by Bob Craig. And we'll start into that in a little bit. So, contemporary and traditional, often pitted against each other. And I would like to hopefully find some common ground and diffuse some of the tension. Have you all heard the term worship wars before? Worship wars? What does it mean? Anyone want to offer an explanation? What is the worship wars?
Kind of where what you just said, the pitting against each other of traditional and contemporary, people within the same body, same congregation that side with one side or the other. I mean, is that right?
Yes. So the traditional against the contemporary. And a lot of times that shows up in what part of worship? The music, yeah, especially in the music. But I want to pull it back to especially that first word, worship. Because I think that is the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is worship. And music is not actually the central issue or the core issue. If someone wants to debate genres with you or different styles of music, it's probably more helpful to step back away from that and to get to the heart of the issue, which is understanding worship. How do the worship wars at contemporary traditional play out in various churches these days? What does it look like?
Some churches have 2 services.
Yeah, 2 services. So you've got your traditional service, your contemporary service, and the congregation divides and goes into those 2 different camps, those 2 different groups. Or they'll have a blended service. And what happens with the blended service is people will be apologizing instead of offering an apology for what is going on. What I hope to do is give you the apology for it so that you don't have to apologize. What's apology? What's that referring to? Yeah, the defense for it. So giving an apology for your faith is not apologizing, I'm so sorry, I'm a Christian, but it's giving your defense for the faith is the root of that word, giving an apology for it. So the apologizing happens when you're talking with someone and you say, well, we sing a lot of hymns at our worship service, but a couple of praise songs, or, we have a praise song, worship, contemporary Christian service, but we do sing some hymns every once in a while, and it's this attitude of apologizing for the other style of music, whatever that may be. And it's not a problem. I don't have a problem with a blended worship service. The issue that I take is the tone of apologizing for it instead of embracing it. So I reject the idea that pitting those 2 against each other. No worship is perfect, but if you believe in the sovereignty of God, then the worship that you have at your church is perfect for you and for your people. And if you are having issues with it, then perhaps that's why God put you there so that He can work on you through these things that you don't appreciate as much. So maybe for your sanctification. Everyone else might be hunky-dory. And extra points if you can spell hunky-dory. So I have to look it up every time. My first point. First point in here, worship wars, we talked about that. How to say tension. My first point is that tension is actually good and healthy. Don't tell your chiropractor I just said that. I'll explain there. So when the socks lose their elasticity, that tension, then they become useless. I'm watching the show West Wing these days. Has anyone seen West Wing? It's about Democrats in the White House, the Democrat president, and it's following just his advisors and things like that. And one of the scenes someone's complaining about the fact that, oh, if the Republicans take over, it's just going to, change things back this way, and the Democrats is going to change things back that way. And the character's response was, that's exactly how the system is supposed to work. That's a good thing, is that these checks and balances and the pendulum that keeps any one side from going crazy is having that resistance. Failed systems are the ones that have no resistance, the totalitarian regimes, where people aren't allowed to voice their opinions, where there's silence, where there are things like hate speech, where people aren't allowed to talk. So in all of these books, they talk about this kind of tension in worship, and they use different words. So this is under different ways to say tension. Some refer to it as, they'll call it dialectical tension. Dialectical tension is one of them. There's a whole slew of words. I've talked before about the cross of reality. That's not in these books. Anyone want to define or explain what the cross of reality is, or who did it, or how to spell his name?
Rosenstock.
That's Rosenstock Huessy. And what is the cross of reality? Well, it's a cross. So it goes these four directions. Inside, outside, upside down is how I think about it. I know it's straight, but if you think inside, outside, upside, and down, it's about the inside, which is working inside the body. Or in a church, it's the discipleship element. It's outside, it's the evangelism. Those two things working in opposing directions, inside and outside. And then forwards and backwards, going into the future, but also the tradition. We think of the contemporary worship and traditional worship, those pulling in opposite directions, inside and outside, discipleship and evangelism. And Rosenstock Huessy's point was that that's a good, healthy tension, and how you plot on that graph is important. That cross of reality, pulling in those four different directions there. Tradition and Reformation. Tradition and Reformation is another way of saying it. Reformed and always reforming. The Reformation doesn't ever stop. Someone refers to this as Bach to the future. Bach to the future. Or Doug Wilson says that it should be, the progression should be walking backwards into the future. So you're looking back, but you're heading that direction, walking backwards into the future. In the Bible, what are those, or how might those two ideas be pitted against each other? What words show up in the Bible with forward and back?
We've quoted the verse before of, I don't know exactly the words, but it was don't forget the I don't remember, something about the
Boundaries, the boundaries, the ancient
Yeah,
boundaries.
the ancient boundaries.
Yeah, don't move the ancient boundary stones. Or remember shows up a lot. Don't forget is what you said. So you're supposed to remember the past. And then the Psalms also say to sing a new song. So you're supposed to remember, and you're also supposed to sing a new song to the Lord. Or there are different offices or positions of authority in the Bible. What are some of those?
Apostles, prophets.
Prophets. Prophets and priests. Exactly. So what's the person holding on to tradition?
Priests.
The priest. Who's looking forward?
The prophets.
The prophets. You've got the prophet, priest. It's not exact. Priests. But yeah, the prophets are usually are often pulling to the future, trying to make that change happen. So prophets and priests. Musically, we've talked before about what term where you have two melodies pitted against each other.
Counterpoint?
Counterpoint. Yeah. Counterpoint. And we get to try something interesting today. I was going to say fun, but I'll just call it interesting for now. On the second sheet of your handout, we've got a mashup. Lobe den Herren and Nundanke Dalagot. These are two melodies that I think that we all know pretty well. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. You have to then track it on down. Let's sing that first melody. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. Oh, my soul, praise Him, for He is thy health and salvation. All ye through Him, now to His temple draw near. Join me in glad adoration. And then below it, the other melody. Now thank we all our God with heart and hands and etc. Let's sing that together. Now thank we all our God with heart and hands and voices, who wondrous things have done, in whom His world rejoices, who from our mother's arms hath blessed us on our way with countless gifts of love, and still is ours today. We have two independent melodies, and we're going to sing them at the exact same time and see what happens. The only challenge is going to be at the bottom. We've got, who from our mother's arms hath blessed us on our way with count. Way is going to have to be just a little shorter, just one beat shorter, and you'll sing with at the same time that the other group is singing join. All right, I'll be with this team. Rachel on over is on my team. Rachel on over is on the other team.
Which one are we?
Y'all take the top part. Now thank we all our God. Bum, bum, bum. And we'll sing praise to the Lord, the Almighty. Together, ready and free.
Now sing we Lord, the Almighty, with heart and hands and voices. Oh, wondrous things have done, in whom His world rejoices. Who from our mother's arms hath blessed us on our way with countless gifts of love, and still is ours today.
I'll show you the recording. And then on the back, we won't sing this one, but I thought, I wonder what hymns you can sing at the exact same time. This one works pretty well too. Let all mortal flesh keep silence, and O come, Emmanuel. So in your free time and family worship.
I want to try it, Jordan.
I do want to try it. I just want to make sure we get through all the stuff. All right, if we have time, we'll come back to those. What was that illustrating? Counterpoint. You've got one melody, you've got another melody, and they actually synchronize pretty well. They come in and out of focus. What is that called when the sounds clash?
Tension or dissonance?
Dissonance. And what does it sound when they resolve?
Consonants.
Consonants. Yeah. Or resolution. Dissonance and consonants. And in music, those are good things, to have dissonance and consonance. We've talked about that also before. You can't have consonance all by itself. That's the new age music where there is no dissonance, there is no tension. It's just happy, 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 and then the song's over. Fades off into the distance. Or a song that has entirely made of dissonance. It's saying something theological if you have something that is all dissonance. What's the theological moment that we've talked about that it's the dissonance and consonance against each other?
Crucifixion.
The crucifixion, exactly. That moment of intense dissonance and then the consonance that comes after it. the theology plays out in music. So tension is good. There's some passage of a book, and I couldn't find it, but I'll find out. I couldn't find it, but I read a passage of a book at some point, and the way that the author wrote it, he or she talked about the concept, the traditional music and contemporary music, and just said, stop it. That don't stop categorizing it as two different things, and start putting it into one continuum. That they're to take away those categories, those walls. And so, yes.
Would you say though that while I would agree with that, you could keep it on one continuum, would you say that there is music that falls outside of the boundaries of what can be considered church music that is being played within churches that shouldn't be added to that, I guess, line?
Stuff is being played in churches that shouldn't?
Right, yeah, basically like when you were saying, it's kind of like one line.
Yeah.
There is some stuff that should fall outside, that falls outside of that line, and it should be kind of done away with.
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
Yeah. Any specific genre that you were thinking of, or?
Oh, we could go into that
Okay.
forever, but yeah.
I sang some Elvis in a church. No, the church was singing an Elvis tune to Jesus, so that was a little bit, I would say, a little outside.
And I have one more question.
Yeah.
You started at the beginning talking about worship, and you brought up how this is what this is really about. But I never really got a definition of worship.
Oh, that's good. That's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. That's number 3. We're almost there. If I don't answer it, then stop me. So, yeah, let's go right to there. So the heart of the matter is worship, exactly, and defining what is worship for really sets apart what the music is going to be. And what you believe about worship is going to affect what you do with your music. So who is worship for?
God and the church.
God and the church. Unbelievers? Yeah.
They're supposed to see worship.
It's supposed to be integrated in, but it's not.
Can they worship God? Can they partake of communion?
No.
Can they be commissioned?
No.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by God in the church?
Caleb should answer that one.
Yeah. You're praising God. Worship is for God, and then it's for each other because it's lifting each other up and
Edifying.
edifying. Edification.
And this is where, like, me being Lutheran, we may come to some disagreements.
Sure.
Yeah.
What passage would you use?
Well,
And maybe not. We may just be talking past each other, but I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
The passage would be the making music to God and singing songs to one another.
Yeah, Colossians
usually
3:16.
is God serving us first.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I was looking for.
Everything we do is just a response.
All right, and we would probably call that praise. I think more, and there may be some Lutheran theologians, Lutheran musicians that would disagree with me on that. But I think we would call our response is more of a praise, and the worship is God serving us.
Yeah, the Lord's service.
Right. It's the name of our
Serving us.
is the divine service. That we come every Sunday too.
Yeah.
So okay.
Excellent. Thank you. So that brings up evangelism versus discipleship. When speaking with someone that's in the contemporary camp, one of their main focuses is that worship is for evangelism. And if you believe that worship is for evangelism, if that's one of the primary purposes of worship, then you will want music that the unbeliever can relate to. You'll want that connecting point for them. That's one component of that. Versus, is worship for discipleship? Is it for God's people? Is it God serving his people and his people's response to that? At what point during the worship service is the unbeliever most connected, or that they can engage with?
Confession.
Confession, perhaps?
The sermon, maybe? I don't know. If they can understand.
Consecrated by the word?
I would say that the word goes forth and does what it does, and I don't think we're going to be able to pinpoint exactly where the word is working on that unbeliever at what point in the service. That's my understanding.
Would you say
True.
the call?
That's kind of what I was going for, is at the very beginning of the worship service where there's the call of come worship the Lord, that's the moment that the unbeliever is called and brought in. So if you were to have something, that a piece of music or the part that would connect with that person, it would be at that point. Everything else is for the unbelievers. For the Christians, confess your sins. This is hear the word of the Lord. This is communion and the commissioning and stuff. That's all for the Christians. The call is for the Christians, come worship God. For the world, for the serve the Lord with gladness, all peoples of the earth. Everyone is called to come at that point. We've talked before. What are some of the attributes of God? That's a laundry list.
Holy, set apart.
Holy. What'd you say?
Set apart, holy.
Set apart. Yep.
Separate from us.
Sovereign.
Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier.
Yes. And there's a lot. What you believe about God affects what you believe about worship and the music and all of that. Having your theology lined up is more important than the music stuff. Again, the genres and the artists and the styles and the keys of whatever songs that you're in. Knowing God, very important. And these books do a great job about that. There are chapters in there on the incarnation, on creation, on the image of God, on things that you might look at the table of contents and think, wait, what does this have to do with music? These are supposed to be books about music, but the theology has to be lined up in order to get the music stuff lined up correctly as well. So that's how those things fit in. And that affects the music in a lot of ways. If you don't, one thing that I've been thinking about is the male and female. If you don't believe that there is such a thing as male and female differences, then in music, you won't see masculine and feminine themes of music. And in classical music, there's a kind of piece called a sonata. And a sonata usually has two themes, a masculine theme and a feminine theme. And they're written in a way that sound like that. There's the masculine theme first, the feminine theme. There's interplay between them as they dialogue back and forth, and then a resolution that happens at the end of the piece. And if your theology of what makes male and female, you're not going to have any sense for what that looks like in music. And some people might say, "Oh, this music is so effeminate." Well, what if you don't understand male and female and what that looks like? Then you won't see that in the music, whether or not the tunes are feminine or masculine. Just one interplay of that. Any other thoughts up to this point? Where are we at? Number 4. This is our first book, Contemporary Worship Music, A Biblical Defense by John Frame. I printed out one of the chapters for you. Again, the table of contents and all of that. You can look through that. Let's talk about the author. Do you know anything about John Frame? Who is he?
Did he do that big book that Pastor
I
Shane
know,
was going
that's
through?
what
That
I
school?
So is he an old guy or a new guy?
He's an old guy. Yep, and he's a heavyweight in the Reformed world. He's
He's still alive or he's old?
Yes,
and
he's
gone?
still alive.
Not that old then.
Westminster West was where he taught. Our pastor Burke Shade studied under him. He's written a lot of books. He did that book. Any other books you know by John Frame? while ago we did a medical ethics book. He's done a number of books about apologetics, doctrines. He's a Reformed guy. He mentioned in his intro, he's a subscriber to the Westminster Confession, the Three Forms of Unity. There's little tolerance, he mentions, in his circles for contemporary worship music. And I've noticed that as well in our circles, little tolerance for that kind of thing. He was classically trained on a piano and organist, and he was in traditional churches, he says, until age 41. So his background is one who's very theologically astute, very musical with organ and piano, classically trained, and coming from a background of traditional music. But in his church in California, that's not what they do. They do the contemporary worship music. And so he explains in his book, how he defends that. Yes.
I just had a quick question about like your church. So are you guys subscribers to the Westminster Confession of Faith?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam.
And others, but it's not the only one.
Like the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith too, or?
Our denomination allows people to come in under that,
Okay.
but our church specifically is
Westminster.
right, Westminster Three Forms of Unity, I believe.
And is that
Those are confessions in the Three Forms.
Okay.
Yeah. So he knows his theology. Pastor Shade, I talked with him, and then I was gonna go through this book, and he said, I agree with Frame on everything but this. He said, but I disagree with him on this. He said, but I understand where he's coming from. Frame was an East Coast guy, and he moved to the West Coast, and he said, the East Coast stuff is not going to work on the West Coast. It's just too loosey-goosey. And it's funny because I've seen that in people that I know that used to be suits and ties kind of people, and they moved to California, and now they're more Hawaiian shirts and in church, and it's interesting.
So would you say contemporary then is not hundreds of years old things?
Is not hundreds of years old hymns. It's a part. So his definition for contemporary worship music is a specific, particular movement in Christian music which originated in California in the 1960s.
That's where I'm from.
So, there's a lot more for it.
Yep. What are some other words that are used for this idea, contemporary worship music, that you may have heard?
light worship?
Light worship,
Low church.
low church, CCM, contemporary Christian music. He mentions that praise and worship music, praise and worship staff, and he talks about those at the beginning of his book, just to define them. The praise and worship stuff being just an unusual set of words to say it's something that's praise and worship, and so he kind of parses that a little bit. And the contemporary Christian music would include stuff used in worship, but also what else for contemporary Christian music?
They're trying to sell records.
What's on the radio?
What's on the radio that the artists themselves would say, this is not necessarily something that you would use in church, but it's Christian music. So contemporary Christian music being stuff that is a little bit of a broader definition that you might hear on the
And
radio.
does he differentiate what? Because there's many kinds of contemporary worship music. Like I go to both my grandparents' churches, and they both sing contemporary music, but they're very different.
Yeah. His definition is the stuff that came out of California in the 60s.
Okay, so you have to know what that is.
Yes. Does anyone have any ideas of what those songs might be?
A lot of that's from the Jesus, all the kind of the Jesus hippie movement, people who were coming out of the hippie style who got saved. So a lot of it was stuff I grew up in more non-denominational, sort of moderately charismatic backgrounds. But Caleb's right, it has a very broad range. The term could now mean basically anything that isn't a hymn.
Yeah.
That's really kind of, so there's different styles within that umbrella.
True. Anyone want to name some songs that came out of that 60s movement?
One style would be a lot of scripture songs where you sing a couple verses of scripture,
Yeah.
like Peace Like a River, or I don't know.
How about Our God is an Awesome God?
Yep. What else? You'll know, shine, Jesus, shine. Dun, 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 dun. Or, great is the Lord. Dun, 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 dun. Or, Father, I adore you. Dun, dun, dun. Or this is the day. This is the day. This is the day. Those kinds of songs.
So Sunday school songs.
Yeah, which is interesting because he says that during this time, his Sunday school songs were the wise men built their house upon the rock, and then it changed into this, and so he sees it as an upgrade from what they had. An interesting point that he makes is during times of Reformation, there's usually an explosion in the realm of music. Give some examples in history.
Luther wrote a ton of music.
Yep, Protestant Reformation.
I mean, the Genevan Psalter was made in Westlaw.
Yep.
Well, even in the 60s was called the Jesus movement. It was
Yeah.
a big change.
That was big.
And a lot of music came out.
What else?
The Enlightenment, a lot of the hymns, I'm trying to go, some of the traditional hymns, like Fanny Crosby and stuff, is from kind of Enlightenment.
When
based,
did
right?
that happen? There's
Isn't that Wesley and
what happened in America?
the Great Awakening?
Great Awakening. A bunch of hymns came out of that. What about in the Bible?
David.
Yeah, that was a moment. That was actually a big liturgical moment because the ark was in Shiloh, and it got moved to Jerusalem and got set up in the tent of David and some different stuff. And there's this explosion in music when Moses brings the Israelites out of Egypt. There's the Song of Moses. There's music that happens during those times. So one of his points was that there's this explosion of music in the 60s. Many Christians are very stiff-armed that stuff, but he says, take a second. The Holy Spirit may have been working through this. Is all of this music going to last forever? No. He said, as happens with all hymns and music over time, the dross gets taken away and the good stuff lasts. So give it a chance. Chapter number 2. Contemporary worship music. We're still under number 4, I think. He talks about a theology of music. So he sets up an introduction. Chapter number 1, he explains who he is, where he's coming from. And then his next chapter is a theology of worship, which is exactly what I've been saying, is that you have to set up your theology of worship before you talk about the music at all. And so it's at that chapter, which I didn't copy for you, but chapter 2, that you can pinpoint, okay, that's where the trajectory of the rest of this book is going, and that's where we might find agreement and disagreement. Agreement on things like, he says, worship affirms the transcendence and immanence of God. Transcendence and immanence, this tension that the vertical and the horizontal that we were talking about. Singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, making music in your heart to the Lord, teaching one another, that those two things happening at the same time. And here are the points of, I guess this is under number 5, theology of worship. Oh yeah, number 5 there. Things to wrestle with that if you're going to have the discussion about worship, this is where he's coming from. You'd have to be able to answer these things. One of them is communication. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, which says, as in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silent. They're not permitted to speak. That's not the part that he was quoting. I thought that'd be funny. But it says, that's the relevant part. Earlier on in the chapter, if with your tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is being said? For you will be speaking into the air. There are doubtless many different languages in the world, and none is without meaning. But if I do not know the meaning of the language, I will be a foreigner to the speaker, and the speaker a foreigner to me. So he's talking about speaking in tongues, and he says you have to have an interpreter, because worship has to be intelligible to what's going on. And later on in the chapter, he talks about orderly worship. If any speak in a tongue, let there be only two or at most three, and each in turn, and let someone interpret. And then the last verse of the chapter says, but all things should be done decently and in order. One of John Frame's main points is the intelligibility of worship, that if the music is done in a style that is so archaic that it's not intelligible to the people, if the language is so archaic that it's not intelligible, then it's a violation of Corinthians 14. The next point being evangelism. He talks about Matthew 28 as being a part of your worship, the Great Commission, being connected to worship. And that in every service, he says there must be some words, some music that directly challenge the unbeliever. There has to be something that directly challenges the unbeliever, is his point. Josh wants to jump in.
No, I am kind of. So, like, how do you guys see that? How does he see that? How does John Frame see that as? So the people have to make a decision. I'm trying to understand where he's coming from.
I think for him, the style of the music and the way that what's being said should challenge the unbeliever.
And he draws that from Jesus saying, baptize and
therefore
teach.
into all the world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the go therefore into all the world is where he's pulling that from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I know your church, in the parking lot, as you pull into one end of the parking lot and you pull out the other end of the parking lot, and there's a sign, right?
Yeah.
What's the sign say?
It says, you're now entering the mission field.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. As you're driving out, you're now entering the mission field. So you'll have to wrestle with the communication. Is evangelism a part of worship? Unity in diversity, which is found in which theological proposition? Unity and diversity.
Trinity.
The Trinity, exactly. His question, his challenge is, how do we love one another and defer to one another in the selection of church music? How do we love one another and defer to one another in church music? Is our church music reflecting unity and diversity, or is it single-minded that doesn't express all of that unity and diversity? And then the last point, the nature of nurture. One of the things that gets thrown at the contemporary worship music scene is, the songs are very simple. And he says, are there simple people worshiping? Children, new believers? And he says, so if simple songs are for the immature, there should always be some simple songs. And that's just talking about the worship part of it. So that's where he's coming from. If to mount some sort of defense, you would have to answer those things.
I think I disagree with him just on his base. The Greek actually states, as you go baptizing, it doesn't say go into all the world. So, that translation, I think taking that kind of out of context and building your defense on it is kind of a weak spot. I mean, there may be Greek scholars that would contend with that, but either way, it's not something that's fully decided on in Christendom. And then also his the simplicity. I think that's where the liturgy, informs. As my children are 6 and 7, and they've grown up in liturgical, Lutheranism. I came from an evangelical background myself, and my kids at 6 and 7 know, the Magnificat. They know Kyrie. They know, they know these things, and they may not know the hymnody as well as other people in the church, but I think that the liturgy itself informs the children. So that's where I would contend with Mr. Frame.
He actually uses the Kyrie and Magnificat service music as examples of simple songs that liturgical churches do. So that's something that he is mindful of as well, and kind of uses that as a.
Does he use those in his contemporary?
I don't know.
I don't know. I tried to find videos and stuff, I couldn't at our church we close, I know you guys do as well, with the Nunc Dimittis, Song of Simeon. And I remember someone from a different church saying, "Oh, I need a simpler version. That's too complicated." And at the time, I had talked with a different church that they sing it as well, and they had a video of their 3-year-old singing the through composed Nunc Dimittis, and there's someone else from this church, I think, that was doing that as well. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And you show this person the videos that a 3-year-old can sing this stuff because it's sung every week. Back to defense of contemporary Christian worship, contemporary worship music. Let's make a list of some of the common talking points against contemporary worship music. So say that you were, what are the party stances against it? What do people most likely accuse them of?
Too repetitive, maybe?
Repetitive, yep. What else did they say?
All sound the same.
All sound the same.
Too emotionally based.
Sure.
The people are still alive that wrote them. Not everybody's
Never heard that one before. I've heard like snippets, like people will say, that's only part of the psalm, that's only part of the scripture, it's not the whole thing.
From a Lutheran standpoint, and I don't know how you guys fall on this spectrum, but like it doesn't properly teach law and gospel. That's what we would say.
Long gospel.
Law and gospel.
Oh, law and gospel.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
just the one side of that.
Yeah, either law or gospel, either way. And sometimes neither. We're actually, like I said, I'm Sunday school teacher of the high school, college kids at my church, and we're going through a song right now that's been #1 on the contemporary worship billboard for 59 weeks.
Oh wow!
And it's,
What is it?
It's
Terrible.
I know what probably is.
Oceans by Hillsong, and it's just absolutely terrible. So.
One of the things that Frame does in the book, and like I mentioned at the beginning, where you have to argue both sides, is he takes these common talking points and then says, how can you view these as strengths? In what way could repetitiveness or the repetitions be considered a strength?
Easy to remember.
It's easy to remember.
And to worship in your spirit, without reading all the lines or something.
Yep. In what way is so there's a sameness to the sound? In what way is that a strength?
I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly did you mean by?
Like the idea,
Well,
like
like
some of our
worship in your
hymns, you have to
spirit.
read all 6 verses, so you have to keep on going and going, so you don't get to stop and think, what did I just say,
Yeah.
So when it repeats it, like if you have a chorus, you don't have to read it, you can stop and think about it as you're singing it.
Okay, so
That was
worship.
my idea.
That's what you mean, like worship in your spirit.
Right, that's what I meant, whereas
Okay.
I don't have to be reading, it's in my head already, I can sing it to God.
Okay.
Memorized or
But memorized, if it's really long, you kind of stop thinking of what you're saying too. Like memorizing chapters.
Possibly. What about the emotional part? Can that be?
everything should be both heart and mind.
Right.
Where in the Bible does it say anything about
Worship the Lord with your heart.
heart, soul, mind, and strength? Yeah.
It says love the Lord. Like,
Love the Lord.
I didn't say worship.
Oh yes. Thank you.
Aren't they related?
I would say related, but I think there's be careful.
Yeah. Snippets. Are hymns complete song? Yeah, that's you're dealing with snippets as well, unless you're chanting. Which you guys do.
But then you're only chanting one song.
Yeah.
Unless you're one song.
Chant the Bible.
I would say these things too, like the repetition. Well, never mind. We're on this side.
What's a good
Well, maybe the repetition you could look at that as kind of, we do the same thing in catechism, you know, we're repeating something to learn it.
Yeah.
You know, the Socratic method of teaching.
And there are psalms that are very repetitive. Psalm 136.
Some songs are exact replicas of one another.
Yeah.
It's really weird when you read through them and you go, wait a minute.
I
This
just
is
love
almost
that.
word for word of a previous song.
Or isn't one like Psalm Moses, is very similar to the song?
Yeah. Also, some of the, I didn't put it up there, but they're short. Some people say it's very short, and there are short psalms in the Bible as well. So Frank does a good job about addressing each one of these and some more, and saying, how can you view this as a strength in what they're doing, and that they're being repetitive, allowing more meditation on the words. They're and when you get some of this, well, it's too much the same or emotional or whatever. His point is actually not to use just contemporary worship music, but that it's one of the tools in a worship service. It's one of the parts of it.
So
but
he's
that-
not arguing for only contemporary worship.
Yeah. And that, well, these songs may be this, we'll balance it out with a hymn or a chant or something else and bring balance to your worship service, is his point. Yep. Let's see. He talks about his worship being, there's a seeker-sensitive term that gets thrown around a lot. And he would say that their worship is seeker-sensitive, but not seeker-driven, which I had not heard before. Oh, that's interesting. The goal of the contemporary worship music is to cover a small amount of material vividly and memorably. To cover a small amount of material vividly and memorably. And I think they generally succeed in that. It's very memorable, it's vivid, it sticks with you. A lot of these songs just, they go over and over. And there are traditions today. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Taizé music. People that they do this kind of chanting, and it sounds more like Gregorian kind of chant, but it's this repetitive over and over again, and allows for this meditation, this mulling over a small amount of material. And he says, he agrees, it all sounds the same. He's got some funny quote. This might be in your copy as well. Frankly, there is a certain monotony about contemporary worship that detracts from the overall freshness of the style. I once subscribed to the monthly tape service of one contemporary worship music publisher, but I canceled that subscription after a year or so. After a while, the songs all sounded the same to me. So he agrees with that, yeah.
One thing that I sometimes, when I'm at one of these a more contemporary church, is the choice of the theme of the chorus is sometimes not as the best choice. You know, like the song, maybe the verses are really good, but the theme might be something about you as a singer, or like what was one? I was like, this is kind of going. It was like it's me, and I was like, well, what? You should say it's me over and over again, because what does that mean by itself?
Right.
It just means nothing really. It's me singing, okay, or something like that. And so then it felt like that's something that is dangerous with having all those repeat. Make sure you're repeating the thing you're trying to get across, not just some little word that sounds nice with a tune. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying.
As we're wrapping up, does anyone have any stories about how contemporary music has perhaps blessed you or blessed other people?
Specifically in worship,
Or in life?
because I think they are easier to remember. So like on car trips, when my kids are starting to fall apart, they're easier. You know, I was try to sing psalms that I've had memorized and like purposely tried to memorize singing, but I get mixed up in the verses. It's just easier for me to forget. And so then I'm like, oh, that song's done. But with the contemporary ones, because it's so simple, we can sing and it helps them have a better attitude. So they're easy. They
It's
are.
what I was raised with in the 90s. So I mean, it was very formative for me as a child and growing up in the church. Most of the songs lyrically were straight up scripture. I mean, very solid stuff and things that I've remembered since and that stay with me. So for that, I'm grateful and thankful.
Yeah.
And in some ways that even hymns have not caught on to me yet. Like I more remember hymn tunes and go, oh, I love that tune. But I'm not really going, oh, those hymn lyrics. Oh yeah, those really stick with me.
Next week, we're going to dig into someone that Frame actually opposes. He has a chapter in this book about an author named Marva Dawn. And we're going to talk about Marva Dawn next week to get the flip side of things. So the title of this book is Reaching Out Without Dumbing Down. That idea of reaching people incarnationally without dumbing down the content of what it is that you're doing. The style of this book is fascinating because I'm used to reading books that are backed by scripture, just filled with scripture verses. Do this because the Bible, Bible. And this had very, very little of it. The content was all spot on, and I could think of verses to back up what she said. And I think that she knows those verses as well. But even the style of her book was to reach out to people. There is that reaching out element without it turning into a theological text that would scare some people off. So it was an interesting read. I'm giving you guys chapter 8. And you can read it or not read it. You can read the stuff I copied out of my books. So you've got my underlines and notes, and hopefully it's nothing too scandalous in there. Or you can just show up next week and we'll discuss it like we did today, and I'll present a little bit about who she is and what the main arguments are, and we can talk about that.
So you say this is the opposite idea of Frame?
Yeah,
Kind of like
they're kind of opposing people. I don't know if this chapter is exactly opposing to him, but the two of them go back and forth. It's good to have both sides.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish with the song. In your packet, there are two songs. When in man's music, God is glorified. And then on the back, if I can speak in tongues of fire. And this is the last page. We'll do one of these days. That's 1 Corinthians 13. Such a good reminder. If you just look at the words of that real quick, that last song. If I can speak in tongues of fire, yet fail to do what love requires, I'm nothing, though high mountains move. I'm nothing without perfect love. And this reminder of unity and fellowship and love towards one another is, again, one of my points with this talk, is hopefully to bring unity and understanding to the different sides. But let's sing When in Man's Music, God is Glorified. And you'll see some of those themes as well. Let's stand together. And if you don't know this one, you're welcome to listen and jump in whenever. There are repeated alleluias at the end that you can catch on to. When in man's music God is glorified, and adoration leaves no room for pride, it is as though the whole creation cried, Alleluia! How often making music we have found a new dimension in the world of sound, as worship moved us to a more profound Alleluia. So has the church in liturgy and song, in faith and love through centuries of wrong, borne witness to the truth in every tongue. Alleluia. And did not Jesus sing a psalm that night,
When the utmost evil strove against the light, then let us sing for whom he won the fight. Hallelujah! Let every instrument be tuned for praise. Let all rejoice who have a voice to raise.